Okay, hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Sunday workout. This is a vodcast aimed at the tournament poker player. This is episode 3. My name is Gareth James. I'm going to be your host and the presenter for today's episode. If you would like to check out the previous episodes, you can check them out on YouTube. You can just type in Sunday Workout Podcast into YouTube and you should be able to pick up episodes 1 and 2. Massive apologies for not making the episode last week. It was Easter Sunday, so that's a big thing for my family, and we like to get together and have a nice meal together. So I just felt like it was more important to spend some quality time with family. And it kind of brings me on to my first point. It's not actually one of the questions sent in, but I do think it's a point worth mentioning. That finding that balance between poker and family and friends and all the other things you have going on in your life, like a full-time job and things like that, can be really, really difficult. But I think you should always try to make time for your friends and family. So even if you just are able to, say, a couple of days a week, you spend some time with them, whether I don't know, you cook together, you go on a date with a loved one, you make effort to go and see your parents or your sister or whatever it happens to be. I think it's really, really important so don't kind of neglect that fact. I know it's all too easy to just sit, come home from work on an evening and sit and play poker every evening, but that doesn't always work out to your best and to your benefit and your best interest and those people around you. Anyway, enough of the soppy stuff. Let's go into the questions. I've got some questions on the other monitor here. So, first question comes in from Bjorn in Belgium. He sent a couple of questions in, actually. So let's look at his first one. He says, until how many big blinds would you rebuy in a tournament? I noticed that rebuying, even when I would have only 5 big blinds and taking the add-on, would yield me a profit in micro stakes. I regularly end up winning them. What is your take on this? If you notice you have an edge, would it change your rebuy strategy? He also goes on to say, also because of this, I'm thinking of applying the strategy of nursing even the smallest stack and only try to rebuy at the very end of the rebuy period, including the add-on. I noticed that because of the gambly way people play, you often lose your stack or see your previously big stack crippled. Great question, Bjorn. Thank you for sending that in. Lots of different things for me to look at here. Until how many big blinds would you rebuy into a tournament? The biggest thing for me about rebuy tournaments, and I'll just bring in a text file so you can see this. Let's make the font nice and big so you can see as well. So let's say that you spend $5 on the entry to a tournament, and that gives you 2,000 chips, which at the start of the tournament, when the blinds are 10-20, equals 100 big blinds. Okay, now you could add on and you could add another 2,000 chips for your extra $5, and suddenly at 10-20 you have 200 big blinds. Okay, which sounds really, really good. All right, starting that deep, having that advantage of playing deep stacked against weaker players is going to be very, very, very beneficial. 100 big blinds. Okay. Sorry about that. Just trying to hide the video preview on the dashboard. Right, okay, let's go back to it. So you have the benefit of playing deep stacks against your weaker opponents, which is absolutely brilliant. Now let's say that later on in the tournament you bust, unfortunately. You get it in with a good hand, and you bust, and you have an opportunity to rebuy again to 4,000 chips, but you notice that the blinds are now 200, 400, probably with a 50 ante, something like that. At which point you realise you've only got 10 big blinds, and all of a sudden your $10 that got you 200 big blinds at the start of the tournament is now only getting you 10 big blinds. So what I would do at this stage is try to work out, well, how good am I at playing a 10 big blind stack? Do I want to be getting into a spot again where I'm going to be short stacked, and it's up to the poker gods how I run, because actually I went from having a big stack down to having a short stack by getting it in good and losing, which is unfortunate. But with 10 big blinds, you've only really got one move, and that's by going all in. So you are going to be at the mercy of the poker gods, the mercy of the RNG, the random number generator that's used on all poker sites. So I would actually say that I'm not a big fan of rebuying $10 for 10 big blinds. Okay, if you got into a tournament at the start of the tournament and the tournament director said to you, right, okay, it's going to cost you $10, but we're only going to give you 200 chips and the blinds are going to be 10-20. You're probably not going to play that tournament because the structure isn't very good. So I think it makes sense in the same way that to not rebuy when you have such a short stack. So I would probably rebuy up to a point where I had maybe 30 or more big blinds, and even that is kind of pushing it, because as soon as the blinds go up a little bit further, you're going to be down to 20 big blinds. Okay. And just got a message through saying that there's no chat in the podcast. There should be, but it's not visible on today's but there is definitely the chat. So if you want to chat, then feel free to do that. And I've got your messages off screen, so I'll be able to see them. Okay. Hopefully that comes through. I'll carry on talking, and then you can just send some more messages through. Okay, so Bjorn was saying that he noticed that rebuying even when he has 5 big blinds and taking the add-on would yield you profit in micro stakes. I regularly end up winning them. If you regularly end up winning rebuy tournaments in micro stakes, then that's fantastic. But I would ask how big your sample is, and I would worry that it was a small sample and you were basing your results on that small sample. To have a real idea of how you're doing in these tournaments, I would look at 500 to 1,000 tournaments before you perhaps say that you're regularly winning them. But if you are, then that's absolutely fantastic and good work. But I wouldn't choose to do it because, like the reason I just said, when you have a short stack, you only have one move. Well, I guess you have two, but one is basically just to get all in. Whether you choose to shove all in or you choose to call all in, is up to you. But basically, all of the chips have to go into the middle, and then you have to rely on having the best hand at showdown. So my take, so it says there, would it change my rebuy strategy if I thought I had an edge? My edge really comes from playing deep stacked against weaker opponents rather than short stacked. I think lots more players are realizing and understanding short stack strategies, so I don't think there's going to be much of an edge, and you can't gain much of an edge really the shorter the stacks get, whereas when the deeper stacks, you'll be able to play much better against your weaker opponents. So I wouldn't recommend nursing just one rebuy. Buying in once to a tournament. It's an interesting concept. I have experimented with it before, and I think I might have touched on it on either one of my videos for Grinder School or here on the Vodcast before, where you just start with single bind. So you start with 2,000 chips, which is 100 big blinds. And there's lots of splashing around going on, and you can expect to double up to 4,000 pretty confidently with your strong hands and by playing solid poker. Obviously, it doesn't always work out like that because as Bjorn has touched on, with the sort of spewy and fishy nature of everyone sort of splashing around, sometimes you are going to get it in good and end up on the losing end. So I can understand it makes sense to buy in once, and then you could take the add-on as well. Another thing to think about is how much is the add-on worth. So I know there's rebuy tournaments on Stars where you first it costs you pay whatever the amount is for 2,000 plus 2,000 chips. Then when you get to the add-on period, you can add on for the same amount, $5 or $2 or $20, however much it is, and you get an extra 5,000 chips. Now that's obviously much better than if they said to you, okay, well, it's just another 2,000 chips. Because at that point, which might be at 200, 400, your extra 2,000 chips is actually only an extra 5 big blinds. So you have to work out, okay, is it actually going to be worth it? Now, all of this sort of happens more in like turbo rebuy tournaments where the blinds and antes get large compared to the size of the stack pretty quickly. And as Bjorn was saying, you can end up busting your decent stack just by getting it all in once with the best hand and getting unlucky or unfortunate. So I would say that you should, we probably up to, like I said, 30 big blinds earlier. I'd probably say 40 or 50 big blinds. Once it dips below that, I think I probably wouldn't choose to rebuy anymore. There's so many tournaments to choose from online that I'd sooner start with 100, 150 or 200 big blinds in my stack rather than rebuy the same amount for 40 big blinds or 35. Okay. I've got some notes here. I was talked about turbo rebuys can get pretty messy, especially as everyone sort of gets really short towards the end of the rebuy period and they gamble for a bigger stack. So it's up to you whether or not you want to choose to play them. You can actually play rebuys as a freeze out, so you can buy in once. You could take the rebuy and play that through. Hopefully, you get to the add-on period, and then you can add on. So, for example, in this kind of tournament, let's say that you were playing an average of $15 games. Then all of that, we just play this out as a $15 MTT. You could do the same for a $2 tournament. You just play it as a $6 MTT. The important thing to think about is whether or not you do choose to rebuy if you bust within the rebuy period. You don't have to, and I would suggest that if you are getting pretty short stacked, then it doesn't actually make sense to do that, and hopefully I've explained why. Okay, so I'll give you a few seconds. I'm going to pour myself a cup of coffee that I've got sitting next to me. If you've got any questions, please put them in the chat now, and I'll answer them. Let's wait a few more seconds, see if there's any more chats to come through. Move this off the screen. I mean, we can always come back to this, but I'll move on to the next question. Let's have a look. Okay, this next question comes in from Alex in the UK, and actually it's not this screen, so I guess we could pull this back up. He says, what's the correct satellite strategy when you have 1.5 times what the average stack will be at the time seats are awarded? Should you fold everything? Jason's saying in the chat he hasn't got any questions. He said it's a useful explanation, so that's some good feedback. Thank you. Okay, so this is a really cool question from Alex. Thank you for sending it in. Let's use our same screen from earlier and we can get rid of this information. So he's saying that he's got 1.5 times what the average stack will be when the seats are awarded. So we should go look a little bit further back. So if you are ever wondering how many chips you need to make a seat in a satellite, then you know exactly what you need to think about. So let's say that you start with 3,000 chips. And you could say that there are 100 players in the tournament. And let's put this, 100 players. And there are 10 seats to the target tournament. Okay. So what you first need to work out is how many chips there are in play at the start. Now I've used easy numbers, 110, to make things pretty straightforward, so you probably could do these in your head, but I'm just kind of showing you on a calculator to make things easier. So we've got 3,000 chips and 100 players, which means there are 300,000 chips in the tournament. And then you can divide this number by 10, and this will be the average stack once the seats are awarded. So there'll be 30,000 chips. So the average stack will be 30,000 once all the seats are awarded. Okay. So you know that your target equals 30,000. All right. So once you get up to that point, now Alex was saying that he was at 1.5 times. So let's say Alex was at 45,000. He's pretty much got his seat locked up. It'd have to be an absolute catastrophe. The other players would have to double up so much and so often once we get close to the bubble that he suddenly finds himself as a short stack and he has to make some moves to avoid busting out and to avoid blinding out as well. All right. But what he needs to do is to make sure that he preserves his stack, and that can mean going as far as folding pocket aces. So let's say, for example, we are on the bubble and Alex has got his seat pretty much locked up, and somebody shoves for 20,000 chips, and Alex has aces. Yes, he's going to win a large percentage of the time, but why do we need to risk half of our stack? It makes more sense to let someone else take the guy out, and we can just sit there happily, sitting there pretty with our 45,000 chips. Now consider again that the person on the bubble shows for 4,000 chips, and we've got a strong hand. Then we can go ahead and call because it's not going to affect our chances too much, given that we're still going to be ahead of the average stack. All right. So hopefully I've explained that. I'll give you a few more seconds to sort of digest that and to ask any questions. And if not, then we'll move on to the next question. Okay, so Alex is saying actually in my study group over on Skype that it sounds good, the information. So let's move on to the next question then. So we have, this is a really cool question. This is from, oh no, we've got a question in from Jason. In a similar situation with bigger blinds, what would your strategy be then? That's a really, really cool question as well. So similar situation, I guess you're meaning similar that we have a bigger stack. And it's probably something that I didn't quite touch on, so this is going to be quite useful. If you're worried or concerned about the blinds and antes eating up your stack and ruining your chances of actually making winning the seat and making that target tournament, then you need to take some spots to steal chips, and we want to take the most risk-free spots that we can. So this probably include stealing from late position, looking for those tight players who might feel like maybe in the same situation that you're in with a sort of big stack, 45,000, maybe 60,000, who feel like they've locked their seat up and you can just take advantage of them by stealing their blinds because, like you, they're just going to want to avoid confrontation when they can just fold their way to a seat. So looking for those sorts of spots is going to be really, really important. You can also look for the really tight players, and you can steal their blinds as well. And once the blinds and antes get pretty big, that's going to be really useful. Just stealing one orb once per orbit, it is going to allow you to stay at your sort of 45,000 chip mark, and massively increase your chances, cement your chances of making that seat, winning that seat, and making it to the target tournament. Okay. Just responding to messages on Skype. We can't connect to the Twitch chat, unfortunately. So I'll take questions and answers and stuff on there. Jason's saying thanks and a smiley face as well. So we seem to be doing all right today. That's good. Right, so let's move on to this next question. Using weak tight today, I tended to use universal replay, and I think that worked well, but just a different way to look at hands today. So this is, let's have a look. This is from Pedro in Peru, and he's saying it's a final table bubble, 10 are left, and he has ace king. What do you think of the play? Okay, so let's have a look at this. So the first thing for me is the perfect information that we have available is that we have, we're at a final table bubble, okay? And looking at these stacks here, we have 31 big blinds, and there is the button who has fewer chips than us, and the big blind who has like about half of our stack, okay? So we would be making a massive mistake to get all in here, in a sort of unfavorable spot, unfavorable position. We have Micro Grinder for Life in the chat. He's saying, hey coach, it's JJ. So thank you, JJ, for tuning in. Appreciate you being here. Like for everyone, if you've got any questions, then just let me know. So let's carry on through this then. So getting our stack all in here, by calling it off is probably going to be a mistake. Not a massive mistake. I mean, we still have to move through quite a few players in order to get to the big money. You know, those top 3 spots is where we're really aiming towards. So with 10 left, we still, you know, we can think about taking more plus chip EV moves. But there is going to be a pay jump between 10th and 9th, which is probably not, it's not going to be insignificant. So it's worth considering. So the first thought here then is with ace king, do we want to be raising it or can we just go ahead and call? And I think on a final table, it's probably best to just go ahead and call a raise because we don't want to get into a flip. We don't want to be calling off with ace high, especially as there are players with fewer chips than us. Okay. So again, focusing on the perfect information that we have available, that it is a final table bubble, and our chips we have, I mean, on this table we have the 3rd biggest stack, could be the same on the other table, so we could have like the 5th or 6th biggest stack with 10 players left, and we don't want to do anything to jeopardize that really, but we still want to be taking, you know, solid spots to pick up chips. So the under the gun player raises to 21k, just over a min raise, and hero elects to 3-bet, and the original player calls. I think this is fine. I mean, you put pressure on him. He's not going to want to get into a big confrontation with you so close to the final table bubble, or so close to the final table. Sorry, because you're on the direct bubble. So you put a lot of pressure on him, and so I like yeah, the 3-bet is fine in that sense. He's still going to call you with some dominated hands. So you know, king queen suited. Probably ace queen, ace jack, ace 10 suited probably goes ahead and calls. So you do dominate some of his hands. I think his pocket pairs might still call, but you can probably bluff some of them off. I think that would be fine. So you raise 21k, hero raises to 48k, he calls. Okay, so you go to a flop that's 7 to 9, and you choose to bet. I think that's about 3rd pot, is it? Yeah, about 3rd pot, and the player goes all in. It says here that you call. So let's kind of stop the action at this bet here. So your bet 33% doesn't need to work very often at all, but we need to think about what kind of hands will fold here. And the kind of hands that we want to fold are those that we're already ahead of anyway. So king queen, king jack, king 10, ace queen, ace jack, ace 10, those sorts of hands. But we don't really want to be giving those cards, those hands, a free card. And also, if he does have a hand, something like queen jack of clubs, he has pretty decent equity against your hand. So you probably don't want to give him a free chance to realise his equity. So I think you kind of can go two ways with this. The betting will probably get him to fold like his small pairs that he decided to try and set mine with. Probably a mistake to do that. So like threes, fours, fives, sixes all fold. But I think if he's calling with any sort of suited connectors, something like I'm trying to think of any suited connectors that he'd go ahead and fold here, because something like 10-8 connects with this board, 10-9, 8-7. I'm not sure he's going to fold to that small a bet. So I'm actually wondering if when you go ahead and fire here with ace-king, how many hands are you actually getting to fold? You're probably getting the hands to fold, like we said, like ace-queen, ace-jack, king-queen, king-jack, king-10, hands that we are way ahead of, and we don't really mind coming along. If they have a hand like king 10, and we can see the turn here, but the chance of hitting that card is pretty small. So I wonder actually if you could just go ahead and check back here. You have a free opportunity to pick up an ace or a king. It's a pretty tough spot. But yeah, anyway, if you do choose to bet and he goes all in, at that point I'm just I'm throwing my hand away as quickly as I possibly can. You still have 225k, which is 22.5 bigs. So yeah, I mean, you still have a good opportunity here with that stack. Like I said, we don't want to be calling off with ace king in this spot. If he is bluffing, let's say he does have the flush draw or some sort of straight draw, then I almost feel like, in a way, good for him, because he is going to have some value hands here that he's just choosing to play this way. So let's say that he's jamming eights or tens or jacks here. You only have 6 outs, and that's going to come in a pretty small percentage of the time. So I really don't like calling off here. It's for your tournament life. If you call here and lose, you have 0 chance of winning the tournament. If you call here and win, then you have a great chance of winning the tournament, admittedly. That's a really good spot. But your chances of winning the tournament are not suddenly going to double when you win this hand. And when you call it off here with ace high, you are not going to double up as much as you think. Just looking at this as well, you do have the king of clubs, so it's not like he's check jamming with king queen of clubs, king jack of clubs hand like that, because you block that exact hand. So you do reduce the number of clubs in his range that he's likely to call with and then jam. Those the kind of hands you're thinking about that you want to jam over the top here that you could call against, like those draws. You actually block some of them, like I said, like king queen, king jack, king 10 of clubs. Okay, so as played, there's some interesting things to think about. We have the perfect information we talked about. That is the final table bubble. We have a decent chip stack. And so the first thing we need to think about, okay, so can we just call here in position, or can we raise? And there are merits to both, and I think that's fine. I guess if you feel that your opponent is very fit or fold post-flop, then it makes sense to go ahead and 3-bet, because it's just going to fold a lot of the time. To be honest, by 3-betting here, you can put a lot of pressure on him pre-flop. Interesting to talk about your sizing here. So he's only having to pay an extra 27k into what is already a pretty big pot. So it's 42, 90 chips. So there's 90k in the middle, and it's costing him 27k. So he's getting better than 3-1 to go ahead and call. So if you wanted to maximize value, you could just make it a little bit bigger. But I guess just having the plan moving forward onto the flop, this kind of flop is going to happen a lot. You're not going to hit with ace king about 60-65% of the time. So you need to have a plan as to what to do in this particular spot. And if you felt like he was going to be fit or fold, he's going to call with a lot of garbage. Things like ace 5 suited without a club or a diamond. Jack 8 maybe of hearts. He doesn't want to call with his gut shot. Those sorts of hands that you can get to fold, then that's absolutely fine to go ahead and see that. Even though you are ahead of those hands on the flop, cashing in this amount of money right now is going to be pretty beneficial. Okay, because suddenly your stack goes up to approaching 400k rather than 314, or as it was when you could have folded, it's 225k. But then when he actually goes all in, I mean, you can do an equity analysis here. So you could say, okay, well, how's Ace King doing against the draws that he has, and the pairs and the sets that he chooses to play this way? Because we have absolutely no idea whether or not this guy is going to be jamming pocket twos over your flop bet, thinking that maybe you have a hand like aces, kings, queens that's never gonna fold. So this is where we're talking about imperfect information. So don't forget, we talked about it a couple of times now. About perfect information is about where you are in the tournament, so the stage of game, and how your stack size lines up against the rest of the field. But then the imperfect information is we really don't know how he's choosing to play the different parts of his range here. And your bet doesn't need to work very often at all. I'm not sure it is going to work that often unless we feel like his range is pretty wide. Now, he's opening from under the gun, so I'd say that your c-bet isn't going to work that often because his pairs are going to continue. And we don't need to get like king, queen, king 10, those sorts of hands to fold in this spot because we're ahead of them and we can just play it straightforwardly on the turn. But yeah, when we choose to bet and he goes all in, there are some players and some coaches I know that will take it as an opportunity to do an equity calculation. Okay, well, this is how Ace King's doing against this particular range, and you can work it out. And you say, okay, yeah, well, we need. I mean, it's pretty difficult to work out on here. That's why universal replay is slightly better. But let's say, for example, we needed, I don't know, 35% equity to make this call here. And Equilab or something similar showed us that we had 38% here. I'd still, on this particular spot, I'd still go ahead and fold because, we win the hand 38% of the time, but in reality, we either win or we lose. And actually, if it is 38%, that means that we lose 62% of the time. So 62% of the time, we're going to bubble this tournament in a spot where we're not even sure if he is capable of jamming a draw on this board, whether or not he's just jamming hands like value hands. So I would just go ahead and fold, continue with your 225k. It's still 22.5 bigs. You still got more than the guy in the big blind. Take some opportunities to take some like risk-free steals from late position, and you should be good to go. Okay. I don't think we need the results. I guess if anyone wants to know them, then just put them in the chat. But hopefully you've understood all of that that I've just said. So I'll drink another bit of coffee. And if you've got some questions, then put them in the chat or over on Skype, and I'll be sure to answer them. So in the meantime, I'll look for some other questions. And I get some messages on Skype, so I'll just reply to them. Because they're about the stream, about the vodcast. And saying that JJ or Micro Grinder for Life is just saying that he's got a question. It's about a situation rather than a hand. So absolutely put it in the chat. I'll be sure to answer that either next or after this next hand. Yeah, so let's go through this next hand. This is also sent in from Bjorn in Belgium, and he's a regular contributor to the podcast, which is fantastic. And he's really making the most of the opportunity to get spots talked about, which is really cool. So definitely recommend you guys to send your questions in and get involved. So his next question then, he says, playing in a live game, which is really cool. He says, at the final table, well done, but 6 places are in the money and there are 9 players left. Okay, so slightly interesting final table dynamics that you've made it all the way to the last table, but still not everyone's in the money. So you've been folding one round of garbage hands. You've got 7 big blinds left. You're in the cutoff, and you get dealt pocket fives. There are 2 other players who have around the same stack. The rest have bigger stacks. The blinds are 3,500 7k with a 500 ante. The tight player in middle position raises to 20k. So there's 35k in the pot. You've got 50k left. What do you need to think about? He goes on to say his thinking was that the antes are huge. They're not overly big, but given there's a worthwhile amount of money in the pot, you don't think that he's not going to fold. So if he's made it 20k and you shove for 50k, he's got 30k to call into a pot of 85, is it? Yeah, so he's definitely not going to fold here. So we don't have to think about having fold equity on our jam. So that's absolutely right. You've made that analysis. That's really, really good. You figure that you're probably coin flipping, so you've got a decent chance of winning the pot. Also, the raise from this particular player didn't look so strong. It's interesting that you should say that because you did say that earlier on that he was a tight player in middle position, and I think that's quite important. I'd like to know sort of where the stacks were around the table. So things like, is he raising into the 3 short stacks? So is it you on the cutoff, the button has a short stack, the small blind has a short stack, and the big blind has an average size stack? If so, then I would think that he has a hand that he's willing to call off with. If you're the only player in that position to, in those last few positions to have the short stack, then maybe not. Some players are not even competent enough to recognize that there are short stacks behind them, and then when someone goes in, they go, oh no, I wasn't thinking about that. I don't know what to do. Oh, I guess I call. So we want to try to avoid that situation. But even the weakest of players know that they're not going to fold to such a small jam over the top of his raise when there's so much in the pot. I would imagine anyway. So you didn't think it looked strong. You're rather confident he didn't have a pocket, okay, or a pocket pair. Interesting to make that sort of read. I guess, I know from what you said in the study group, Bjorn, that you've played quite a lot of live games and you have a pretty good feel and read for players. It is more difficult to be dealt a pair, obviously, but I would find it very, very hard to say I don't think he has a pocket pair here. So I would almost avoid situations like that. What we need to do here, this goes back to perfect and imperfect information. The perfect information that you have is that you're at the final table, but 3 players still need to bust in order for you to make the money. You might not even be concerned about making the money. Another bit of perfect information is, let's say that 6th place pays $150, but $150 for you is not a lot, and you want to shoot for, I don't know, the $1,500 that is first prize. Again, you're kind of putting it into a real world dynamic, I guess, and thinking, okay, well, how much is that money worth to me? There's some players $150 is going to be very, very valuable, and you want to pick that money up. Whereas some players are going to think, actually, I want to shoot for first, second, or third, where the money is more significant, and that's what I'm going to go for. I'm going to do everything I can to get there. So you kind of have to think about your own situation, and it's going to be different for everyone. So yeah, I'd focus on the payouts, how much each payout means to you, what sort of position you're shooting for. That's what I'd think about. Then I'd be thinking about his range, and he said that he didn't think he was particularly strong, even though he said he's a tight player raising from middle position. So I think that's also pretty interesting. And then I'd also think, okay, how does fives play against that range of hands that I think he has? And the downside here is, again, we can use Equilab. Let's bring in Equilab now, and I kind of show the difficulty here of what we're talking about. So hopefully you can see that. Just checking on the other screen. Yeah. So let's say, for example, you thought he was pretty tight, and he's raising from. Let's go from this position. That's obviously a pretty tight range. and really tight. In fact, you can see how fives is doing against that range, and you can see, okay, so you can say to yourself, right, well, 40% of the time here, I'm going to more than double up and give myself an opportunity to move forward in the tournament. 60% of the time, I am going to bust the tournament and have no opportunity to win this hand. Essentially, what you're saying is by shoving here with no fold equity, is that you are essentially like just calling off your chips. So let's say that he just shoved all his chips in and you called with pocket fives. And the problem with making that sort of play is that the only way you can win is by having the best hand at showdown. Whereas if, let's say, you folded this particular hand, but the next hand you got 10-9 suited and you decided to shove from the hijack, what you have then is fold equity together with hand equity. And let's say, for example, this is the guy's calling range. If you shove, you have 35% equity, which is less than the pocket fives, admittedly. But don't forget that if that's his calling range, then he's going to fold everything else, and that's it's only 8% of hands, which means that he folds 92% of the time. Obviously, there are a few players left to act behind you, so we need to make the calculation with them. But the whole point is that fold equity and hand equity together is going to be much better than just hand equity alone. So if you, you actually go on to say about his, you thought he had at least ace-9 or ace-10. Let's put a few more hands into this guy's range. Something like this. And Chris Jams has just joined the chat and the stream. He said, "Hi all, what's happening? What's a vodcast?" This vodcast, Chris, is basically every Sunday. I'm going to be delivering a vodcast at 4 o'clock UK time, 4 p.m. And you get to send in any questions that you have, and I answer them live on the stream. So hopefully that's explained it. You can watch the first 2 episodes and this episode on YouTube, and you just need to go to youtube.com and type in Sunday Workout Vodcast, and it should come up. Anyway, so let's go with this kind of range instead. And let's have a look, see how fives is doing this time. And fives has pretty, it's pretty decent equity. So again, we can just go back to the most simple of theories, that you either win this hand or you lose this hand. So it's 50-50. You don't get to run this equity calculation millions of times. And here's just something I'm going to show you. This is what Equilab does. Okay, so this is evaluating 25-30 million games. All right, and let's stop it at 50 million. That seems about right. Okay, and you can see fives has this amount of equity against this particular range. But you don't get to play this hand 50 million times, do you? All you get to do is just play it once. And if you're, get there on the river, you have the best hand at showdown, then brilliant. If you don't, you bust out, you leave the casino. It says it's a live game, yeah. So you leave the casino or wherever that live game's happening, and you have to go home, which is a bit of a bummer. Hopefully that expression makes sense. Obviously, anyway, let's move on. Okay, so that's the situation. So what I would say is, with all the chips out there, you probably have enough equity to go ahead and make this call. But if you're thinking about hand equity and fold equity, then with no fold equity, we have to have the best hand at showdown, and you've got to decide for yourself whether or not you want to make the call here. You could also think about what range of hands you would go with if you were going to fold fives. So you can see suddenly, let's change this to enumerate all. Tens is doing much better against this range. But even so, it's still only going to be 50-50. You either win or you lose. You could look at pocket queens. He's doing pretty well, but again, you either win or you lose. So you kind of need to just think through that. I would say that with 7 big blinds, if you have an opportunity to, I think the easiest thing to think about is say, right, let's say you got pocket tens or pocket jacks. For yourself, you go, okay, well, I feel really confident about getting this hand in, and you go with it. If you're ever in doubt and you think, I'm not quite sure about this, then you should probably just go ahead and fold. So what we want close to a final table is slam dunk decisions. There's times when you get dealt a hand and you high five the dealer basically, and he's just feels a bit weird. You obviously wouldn't do that because you're kind of giving your strength of your hand away, but you get the point. When you have a more marginal hand like fives, or let's say you have like ace nine offsuit, something like that, then you have to decide. It's not like a slam dunk decision. Maybe I shouldn't be going with it. Another thing I mentioned, I made some notes beforehand. I said, how likely is it that 3 other players will bust before you as well? You said there are 2 stacks the same size as yours, but everyone else was bigger. If the table's playing pretty loose and a bit splashy, then you could probably fold your way into the money. But again, this comes down to, do you want to just make the money or do you want to make the top 3? So I think as in this spot, I would probably just go ahead and fold your pocket 5s here and look for a spot to just open shove. Even when the blinds and antes go through you again, you're still going to have like 5.5, 6 big blinds, and you still have a little bit of fold equity, I would think. So yeah, I'd probably just go ahead and fold, although it is really, really close. And from a chip EV point of view, pocket 5s is absolutely fine to go ahead and get in there. So that's the kind of difference. I guess we're close to the final table. We want to be taking spots where we can put pressure on other people rather than having to rely on having the best hand at showdown. So I feel like I've talked a lot there. I see some more questions coming in, which is really cool. So I'll try and get through them. If you've got any questions about that hand, then let me know. So Micro Grinder for Life, which is JJ in the States, I believe. Let me just check. All right, let's go back here. As Bjorn was saying, he was the only player in the late positions with a short stack. I don't think that affects things too much. Hopefully I've explained why I would choose to go ahead and fold in that spot. But I can't fault you for going with it, because it is a plus chip EV move, and you are still a few places away from the money. And if you're fighting for the top 3, then you can calling there can't be too bad in that spot. So Micro Grinder for Life has got a question, and Chris Jam's got a question as well. So Micro Grinder for Life is saying, here's the situation hand. Live MTT, mid to late stages. Average chip stack is around 20 to 25 big blinds. You're on the button with pocket 5s to 9s. Okay, there's 3 limpers and the chip leader makes it 4x from the hijack. You have 20 big blinds. It's been super aggro since you got the chip lead. You, as well as 2 of the limpers, flat. The flop comes ace, king, 7, all hearts. It checks to the razor and he open shoves. What do you do? He also goes on to say you flop to set. Okay. Right. I've noticed as well that Bjorn's got a question in the chat, so we'll come back to that. So I have seen it. The first thing I think you did, the first thing about a mistake that you made here, so I'm guessing you've got like pocket 7s then if you flopped the set. With 20 big blinds, you can't call for set odds at all. You just have to shove. If he's being super aggro, I'd probably just go ahead and shove. I think if one of these hands is going to be pretty strong. We're doing pretty well against his range, even if he chooses to call you. But if he's being super aggro, then he's got to fold a lot of that range. You don't say that you're close to the final table, so you're not going to be making too much of a mistake by making an aggressive move over an aggressive player. So I think, any of these hands, I just go ahead and rip it in with 20 big blinds against a player that's very aggro. But as played then, the flop comes ace king 7 all heart, checks to the raise, and he open shoves. What do you do? I'd be very, very surprised to see him shove a flush in that spot. It's not, outside the realms of possibility. But the only things I can think is maybe he shoves the hand like 6-4 of hearts. The low flush. something that he just doesn't want anyone else to get there with. He doesn't want to see another heart and see his small flush get beaten. But even then, I think he'd probably just make it half pot. Having looked at it though, hang on, he makes it 4x and then 2 other players flat. So there's 16, there's probably 20 big blinds in the middle anyway. So any sort of pot size bet is going to be all in. So you can't take too much from that. I still don't think he's got a flush though. I think he would probably bet small and hope someone else sort of spazzes out and shoves over the top. So I don't think I'm ever going to fold in that spot. And if he has the flush, then you just need to suck out and turn or river the full house. If he has aces or kings or ace king in this spot, then that's just unlucky. I'm guessing he lost this hand. That's why I'm saying it's unlucky. But if he has aces or kings, it's unlucky for you to get set over set in this spot or get beaten set over set. If he has ace king and he manages to hit an ace or a king on the turn or the river, then that's just unlucky. So hopefully that answered your question there. Just let me know. So Chris Jams has got a question as well. Bjorn has got a comment then. It says, thing is, this guy had only 13 big blinds. Knowing this player, he would have shoved his stronger hands. So we're going back to the live game, final table, 9 players left, 6 in the money. Bjorn's sitting there with 7 big blinds, and this guy has 13 big blinds. So knowing this player, he would have shoved his strong hands. He wants to be able to fold his weaker hands when shoved on by a big stack, which sounds reasonable. So again, okay. So here's the downsides to this kind of analysis. So I would guess that you probably think that I don't know, let's say that he shoves these hands. You think he's going to shove these strong hands. So I'm guessing then that you think he's going to open these sorts of hands and fold them to a shove. I think that's a pretty bad strategy, by the way, just to kind of think about this. I don't think he's always just going to go ahead and shove aces. If he's raise folding some of these weaker hands, then he needs to go ahead and raise call some of the stronger hands. So I don't think we can just rule it out. So let's put in, let's say that he's going to raise call aces, he's going to shove kings through sixes, and he's going to shove these hands as well. Okay. Again, this is an example of imperfect information. You just have no idea about this player. I don't think we could ever say about anybody, let's just say, okay, what's Phil Ivey doing in this situation? Nobody knows. All right. You could think about it from a game theory optimal point of view, and you could think, okay, well, in theory, you should be doing this, make it optimal, but we just have no idea. So again, this is an idea that we have, and we can run this strategy, run this calculation, and you can see that you're doing pretty well in this spot. So you should be pretty happy. Okay, but don't forget that again, you are just going to win or lose at showdown, and this makes it a lot more profitable if you get to play this hand, like we said here, millions of times. But actually, we only get to run it once. So you need to think about that. Are you happy with this amount of equity against that range? And is that going to be enough for you? And that really needs to just come down to your own personal judgment. Okay. Hopefully I've explained that well enough. Leave some chat if you want to. Heward8866 is in the chat. He's saying hello. Anybody else in the chat? He seems to be a bit late to the show, but there are other people in the chat. They just haven't commented for a while. And he's also saying that he's in the Vodcast on the study group as well. So hello, welcome. Thank you for tuning in. Appreciate you being here. Jason's telling him, yeah, there's quite a few of us in there. Right, so I'm going to make this the last question, I think. Chris Jam then said, what are the most common filters to run on Hold'em Manager 2 to review our MTT game? Also, what are your review rituals when going over a session? Wow, what a question. That is a really cool question. Thank you, Chris, for that. Let's bring in our trusty text file. Probably going to have to make this pretty big for me to be able to go through exactly what my thoughts are. Okay, so let's have a look. What's the most common filters to run? I think it makes sense to filter for problem spots. Okay, so what I mean by that is, are you struggling in 3-bet pots? Are you struggling in a single raised pot as the pre-flop aggressor? Are you struggling with a specific hand, like pocket pairs, anything like that? Like pocket, let's say small pocket pairs, so 2s through 6s or 7s, let's say. So you can filter for those exact hands. So I'd filter for problem spots. I also like to filter for short stack game. You've got to keep your short stack game pretty sharp. And I'll add some caveats here that you can filter for like 0 to 12 big blinds to see how you're playing. You can do it like you could focus on your 3-bet game, so you could filter for this sort of stack size. Now we could probably make this a bit bigger. Okay, you could also filter for calling shoves, and obviously I've talked about it today on how. Well, I've talked about it before on the training videos that I make and on the Vodcast, that calling shoves is the #1 cause of variance, but you don't want to be passing on too many opportunities, especially well away from the money or well away from the final table. But you need to be working on calling shoves. I think that's probably it. Let's just add some filters. So you can put some examples in here. So maybe 3-bet pots as the aggressor. Maybe you're struggling with top pair, top kicker type hands. There's so many things to think about. It's very difficult for me to say exactly. But something that I think is really interesting to do is to filter for short stack play, and also you can filter for facing, under the gun raises, cutoff raises, because obviously your range for shoving against an under the gun raise is going to be different for shoving against a cutoff or a button raise. Okay, and you could also look out for your stats in different positions as a short stack, and you also look at what your win rate is in different positions on a short stack as well. Because all of this, you'll always be short stacked at some point in a tournament. Maybe had a couple of tournaments in my life where I wasn't a short stack at all in the tournament, but most of the time you're going to be a short stack. But whereas these problem spots maybe only come up occasionally, so you perhaps don't need to focus on them too much, but you definitely need to be focusing on your short stack game. He also asks, Chris is saying, what else your review rituals when going over a session? Okay, so most of the time when I go through a session, it's very similar to what I would do with a student. We can look for big losing pots. We can focus on a particular stack size. So for example, we could look at 25 to 40 big blinds and see how our strategy might change in that particular spot. Maybe as we're going through the review, you might find out that if I'm looking at myself, maybe I'm c-betting too much. Maybe I need to have more of a balanced c-betting range. Therefore, I need to think about what sort of hands I can choose to check back. There's quite a lot of things that I would go through when I'm reviewing my own game, but I almost have that feeling. Okay, I know what I know where I'm going wrong, so that's an area that I'm going to focus on. What else? Review rituals. I always use ICMizer to run through short stack spots just to make sure that that's really, really tight, and just change the variables. That's going to be really, really important. Let me add that as the last bit. So when you're reviewing a tournament, there are some situations that are going to come up time and time again, like I talked about with your short stack game, about calling shoves, about 3-bet shoving, about open shoving. But what can be really good when you're reviewing the tournament is to change some of the variables, okay? Because when you are deep stacked, or even when you're shorter stacked, there are some spots that don't come up time and time again, or the exact spot where you had 13.5 big blinds and pocket twos on the cutoff. Maybe that doesn't come up too often. But what you can do is say, okay, well, if I'm not going to go with pocket twos in this spot, what range of hands am I going to go with? And then you could say, okay, well, how many big blinds would I have to have in order to go with pocket twos? And you can change the variables somewhat. You can think about your position. You can think about the different players around the table. What if this player from the button was actually quite tight and wasn't opening a lot of buttons? Should I still be 3-betting with the same sort of range from the blinds? So hopefully that's kind of shown you what I tend to look for. I noticed that Chris has put another question in. Might have to save that for next week. Let's see. Yeah, we're up over the hour. I like to keep this sort of like 45 minutes to the hour. So we will have to leave that for next week, I'm afraid, Chris. But thank you very, very much for the question. Thanks to everyone for sending the questions in. I'm going to give you a few seconds just to see if there are any final questions, and then I'm going to sign off. So let's move that out of the way. We can bring back our wonderful picture telling you what this is, and I'll just wait for you guys to leave something in the chat. Chris is saying then, awesome, made the notes as you made them. I never review sessions and need to do this, thanks. Yep, absolutely. If you're not reviewing sessions, then I think you are making a big mistake. So it's great that you've analysed that you need to start doing that. So good work on that. I believe seeing that you posted that hand about the final table of a Micro Millions event, then you actually, you did final table it, didn't you? I think we're going to have to come back to that, but congratulations on making that final table, Chris. That's really quite awesome in such a massive field. Microgrinder for Life is saying, what do you use as stats on your HUD? That came up in episode 1, I think. So if you want to check out that, it's a nice easy plug for me. That you can just say go to episode 1 on YouTube, and you can watch it all if you want to, but you can also just go through to the bits where I talk about the HUD and which stats I use and why they're important. Whilst I'm just waiting for a few more questions, if you want to follow me on Twitter, you're not following me yet, and you really should be. It's at Gazelic Poker on there. If you want to get in touch about private coaching or about some webinars that I run, anything like that, maybe you just want to send me an email to say hello, then it's gazelicpoker@gmail.com. And if you want to add me on Skype, be part of my study group, which is doing really well. New members every few weeks. It's going really well, and everyone's supporting each other. Then that's fantastic. Then it's Gazelic Poker on there as well. And if you are watching this on Twitch, then you obviously know that the Twitch address is twitch.tv/Gazelic Poker. Like I said before, episode 3 will be on YouTube within the next few days. You can watch all 3 episodes now on YouTube if you go to Sunday Workout Vodcast. Well, at least you will be able to in the next few days. You can watch episode 1 and 2 already. And yeah, that's going to be it for the Sunday. Chris is saying thanks. Microgrinder for Life is saying great, thanks, great cast, man. You're absolutely welcome. And I'm going to see you guys all next week for episode 4. So if you've got your questions, then just get them in. And I'll be sure to answer them next week. All right, guys, good luck today. Have a fantastic Sunday, and I'll see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.